Hello and welcome. I am very pleased to introduce the topic tonight and my guest. First of all, the guest is Thi Synavone. She is the Executive Director of Standpoint, which is a very innovative, wonderful resource here in the Twin Cities, located in St. Paul. We're going to talk tonight about domestic violence and abuse, about sexual violence, about all kinds of violence, and talk about ways people can get help, things to do. I think you'll find it a half hour packed with ideas. So welcome, Thi.
Thank you, Mary.
You've not been executive director long, but you've been an advocate in this whole field of abuse and violence for years and years, you told me. And how did you come into that whole career channel, in a sense?
Yeah, so I have been working in the domestic violence, sexual violence field since 1997.
So almost 3 decades,
Almost 3
as
decades.
you said, which is hard to believe.
And I first started my career off in southwest Minnesota. So I was working in Worthington, Minnesota, which is where I grew up. I went to high school and things there. And so I fell into the position, kind of. Actually, I saw there was a posting for an advocacy position for a local domestic violence, sexual violence organization in Worthington. And it was an organization which I didn't even know exist, right? When I was reading about the job description, when I was reading about the services that they provided, I thought to myself, I didn't know that these types of services existed in our community. I mean, growing up in my background, growing up having experienced and watching my family and community and friends and things have gone through domestic violence or gone through situations of sexual violence, and seeing that they really didn't know that there was options or resources, or if they wanted to leave the situation or stay in the situation, or if they wanted to get help, they didn't know there was any resource for that. And clearly I didn't know there was any resource as well. And so when I saw that posting, I was like, this is very interesting. And I had always been very interested in doing social justice work and also in helping. So I've always been kind of interested in doing service work.
Can we go back a minute to where you grew up? And you're from originally Laos, correct?
Correct, yep.
And your family, though, we were just talking a little bit before the show started, your family fled and had to come to America eventually. But can you just tell us a little bit? We don't have a lot of time, but I think it's so interesting how your parents made the decisions they did. And can you briefly fill us in on that? Because it all kind of fits together that you end up with this kind of a career.
Right. So my family are refugees, and we came to the United States in 1979.
79.
In 79, yep. And we fled Laos in like 1976. Fled Laos, went to Thailand, and we stayed in a refugee camp in Thailand for a couple of years before coming to the U.S. And so, you know, during that time of unrest in Laos, right after the war and all of that, my parents made a really difficult decision to leave their home country because it just wasn't safe for our family to live in Laos anymore. And so leaving Laos, they made a strategic move, I would say, in choosing to flee the day that my brother was getting married. So my brother had a wedding that afternoon. We had like a dinner afterwards, and there was like a reception and whatnot, just like a small village type of wedding gathering. And that is the night that my family rounded up my mom and some of the children, well, all of the children, except for my brother that was getting married, and he didn't know that we were going to come.
Oh.
we all left. So we all left and we crossed the Mekong River from Laos over to Thailand. And we had to do that at night, of course, because we were fleeing. Nobody could know that
So
we
it
were.
was very dangerous.
It was a dangerous
To
situation.
do that. You said you had a vague memory as a 3-year-old of fleeing that night. That's amazing.
Yep, I have a vague memory because not only was I 3, so my parents gave me some medicine for me to fall asleep during the time we were crossing the river so that we wouldn't be found, so that nobody would know that we were fleeing. Yeah, so we had people helping us cross. So my dad had made arrangements for some people to help us get a boat and get us in the boat and then help us cross. And they knew a route that we could take and all of that. So it was planned. So we didn't want to draw any attention to us. So yeah.
Wow. I just thought you would enjoy, in a sense, or appreciate, is the better word, her story.
If you talk to other Lao refugees or Hmong refugees who were fleeing Laos over to refugee camps in Thailand, I mean, a lot of them similarly had to do what my family did.
I've read stories too, but I've never talked to someone who's actually done it. Well, you alluded to the fact that there was more sexual violence that you experienced other people having as a young child and woman. Do you think that the numbers in terms of people who are victimized is greater in Laos and Thailand and countries you've lived in than here?
Well, I came to the United States as a really young girl. So statistic-wise in how, what are the stats, right, in Laos for domestic violence and sexual violence, I'm not sure what those statistics are compared to the statistics of here in the United States. However, what I will say is I do think that because the United States has advanced more in our laws, in our legal system, in the rights of women than Laos, for example, or other Southeast Asian countries, I feel like domestic violence in the Asian countries, women feel like they have to stay in the relationship more. Women feel like they have fewer resources, don't have people to talk to, or they're not more willing to seek help and talk about it. So I think in that sense, like if we look at the numbers statistically, it might be the same, but in actuality, is it happening more? It could be. Now, again, the statistics in the United States as well, like I said,
they're probably underreporting our
people
statistics
underreport
too.
as well. So a lot of people don't report when they are sexually assaulted, when domestic abuse happens in the home. A lot of times when people do make a report to law enforcement, it's not because they want the other person to go to jail, or it's not because they want any type of their family to fall apart or anything like that. It's because they want the violence to stop. At that moment, what is happening has become too much and they need an intervention. They need something to come in to intervene to stop the violence from happening. And so that's when someone usually makes that call to law enforcement or seeks help.
So kind of when things get really bad. When you're working with women and your staff or men, that are feeling like things are terrible at home or where we live, what are some of the first things you want to be sure people understand and hear? Because I think, as you said, there's a real tendency for people to think, oh, it's going to get better, this is a bad point, but we'll get through it. So what do you say to the person who's calling and saying, to you or to your staff, I think I need help?
So what we do, so at Standpoint, we have an action line, and our action line is open Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And survivors can call our action line talk to an advocate, and usually what our advocates will do is try to gain an understanding of the situation that the person is in, right? So they're going to share, whatever their caller is comfortable in sharing with our advocate around the situation, what they're experiencing, what's happening.
So this is all by phone.
It's all by phone. So what they're experiencing in their relationship, and also they're going to talk about, what would they like to see happen. What type of resources, what type of help is it that they're looking for? And the unique thing about Standpoint, about the organization that I'm at, is not only do we have legal advocates that callers can talk to, if the caller has a legal question, we also have attorneys that will take the call as well. And so once they talk to an advocate and they can identify what is their legal question, what is it that they want, right? And so that's why we always ask, what would you like to see happen?
And the attorneys, and this is really important, are free. They're not charging attorney type fees.
Yeah.
Do you put people in touch with an attorney for a secondary visit? I mean, they don't get to talk to an attorney right away, do they?
Yeah, so that's the unique thing about Standpoint.
Okay,
so
that is unique.
That's the unique thing about us is that callers can talk to an attorney right away. I mean, usually though, we have lots of calls, and we serve the entire state of Minnesota. So anyone that is experiencing domestic violence or sexual violence can call our action line, plus advocates and other professionals that work with survivors call our action line as well to get help. So, like advocates might be working a really complex case and wanting support or guidance.
Yeah.
Our advocates are seasoned advocates. They've been doing the work for a number of years and also have areas of expertise, varying areas of expertise. And so our advocates provide support to other legal advocates around the state of Minnesota.
I can't imagine how you handle all this, because thinking how many people need this service.
Right.
Well, I have about 4 questions that are fighting for my attention here. Do you have a limit in terms, Ty, of how many times people can get in touch with your staff? Like after 4 visits, we need to,
We don't.
You don't.
So we don't. So callers can call us, advocates can call us, professionals can call us. We don't have limits on how many times you call, as long as we're giving you new information, right? And so sometimes survivors will call us and talk to us about their situation. We will provide the options, provide resources for them, and then connect them with the attorney. They can talk about their legal options, what the legal process might look like, answer any of the legal questions that they have. And then the last thing we will do is that we're going to try to connect them to a local community resource so that they can get more of that one-on-one advocacy, in which our organization cannot provide. Because
so you're not sitting down with people one-on-one in the office.
No.
Right. So you're really a referral agency in a sense, right?
Yep. So we would provide, sometimes we do safety planning. We kind of like do the initial part of letting a person validating their situation, talking to them, helping them process maybe an experience that they've had,
Supporting
do a lot of
their
listening and supporting.
Desire to do something, right?
Or not do something.
Or not.
Talk about orders for protections, talk about harassment restraining orders, talk about what options are out there. And sometimes a person will call the first time, hear the options that they have, and aren't ready to make that decision.
Sure.
So they'll call back again, and maybe that second time they're not ready. But it's, it just takes time.
One of the most, to me, kind of fascinating aspects of this, from what I've learned, but correct me if it's no longer in vogue, so to speak, but I've heard that when people are in an abusive and violent situation, oftentimes the abuser will be very remorseful, and there will be kind of a honeymoon period where the person is on great behavior for a while.
Right, right.
But I've read, and I'm not sure it's true, that the periods between the good behavior and then another bad, patch
Episode.
get shorter and shorter.
Right.
But the woman or the man who's been the victim gets so hopeful, and then, at some point loses hope, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yep. So in my early days of advocacy, we did talk a lot about that cycle, the cycle of violence, and that stage you're talking about is called the honeymoon phase, right?
Right.
Now we don't even refer to that anymore. We don't
don't?
refer to that because a lot of times what we've found is the longer a person is in a relationship that has abuse, has violence in it, the honeymoon phase just goes away. So then it just becomes
just one bad thing after
Yeah,
another. That makes sense, that if it goes on long enough. Do you include, Thi, emotional abuse if it's severe? Or how does that play into this?
So emotional abuse is a part of violence, although we do provide services for people who are experiencing emotional violence because we do identify that it is a part of violence, right? However, the way that our laws are and your eligibility to qualify for orders of protections, things like that, there has to be physical violence.
There does.
There does have to be
that's
physical violence
interesting.
to be eligible for some of those remedies, like order of protections and things.
Okay.
But as far as our services, if someone is experiencing emotional violence, like threats to their safety, a pattern of behavior to like calling them names, using financial violence. So there's lots of ways that someone
Can wear the if we use the word victim, it can wear the person who's being abused down, emotional abuse, can it?
Yeah, people, can start to experience a lot of anxiety or depression or, isolation and start to feel like there isn't hope. And so sometimes, in my work and in the years that I've worked with survivors, victim survivors, is sometimes they have told me that the emotional abuse is sometimes worse than the actual physical abuse because the name calling, all of that stays with them. But an act of physical violence, the bruise goes away.
Oh, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. And I wanted to just clarify, when you're listening as a listener, you don't just work with people who are from other countries. This is for anybody, no matter your income level, no matter your ethnic background, wide open that way.
Yeah. Again, that's another area that makes Standpoint unique, right?
Yes.
You have the opportunity to speak to a legal advocate and also an attorney, and we don't have any income guidelines, any eligibility that you need to qualify for. As long as you are going through domestic violence, sexual violence, and you have questions around that, we will talk to you and we'll, answer your questions.
It's just an amazing resource. I'm sure some people who are listening are saying, now how does this get funded?
Right.
Just briefly, can you explain that?
Yeah, so we are funded by state grants. So Crime Victim Services funding, we get money to provide these services from the state. We also get funded by foundations, individual donors, and we write grants and things like that too. So our funding pool comes from a variety of areas to be able to provide these services. And like I said, we are a small organization. Our main office is here in St. Paul. We have 11 staff, but we talk to everyone in the entire state of Minnesota. And so, yeah, we're a small staff, but we cover a lot of ground.
What about shelters and directing people to shelters. Do you have someone who does that specifically, or is that something you can get help?
Yeah. So anyone in our office, when they're talking to someone, if the person says, you know, I'm in need of a shelter, we have access to a database that can look up what shelters in the entire state of Minnesota actually has a bed space open. And so we have the ability to help with that. We have the ability to connect the caller to the shelter that has open space for them to do their own screening. I mean, we can never guarantee that. We just see that there's a space available, but we don't guarantee that that bed will be open for the person on the call, because they have to do their own screening with the other
but
organization.
At least you're giving them a good hot tip, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And that is really important, that we are able to provide all of those services in that one phone call, because what we find at Standpoint is a lot of times callers call us, and when they've called us, they've already called 5 or 6 other places before they've called us, and they've just been getting like the runaround. They've just been getting, oh, we can't provide services. Oh, we don't do that. Oh, you have to do an intake first, and they aren't getting the answers to their questions. And so by the time they call us, they're already frustrated. They already feel like they've been just, you know, they already have been going through a lot, but now they feel like nobody wants to help, right? And
so you're talking to people who are probably almost a little angry, expecting a no from your staff, right?
Yeah. And even with the services that we provide, we still wish like we could do more, because people have there's just a lot of needs and not enough resources.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, when you think of 1 out of 4, 1 out of 7, and underreporting, I mean, yeah, I'm sure you're in hot demand. Another question I have is about, I guess, the word recidivism. I know with drug and alcohol addiction, people often go through treatment and then do really well, and then maybe, you know, a pretty high percentage end up starting to use drugs or alcohol again. Is that also true in your field here, that if people break away from abuse and violence, do they often end up back with another abuser type person?
I mean, sometimes, right? Sometimes that does happen, and sometimes they go back to the same person that has hurt them before. So, as advocates, as people who are doing this work, we are very non-judgmental. We recognize that this is the choice of the person, and they have to make the best choice that is for them. And so, you know, we're there to provide the support. We're there to provide options and resources, and really listen to them, and not be judgmental in any way, and also not tell them what to do, because they know what is best for them in their situation. And so sometimes people do resort to, you know, returning back to that relationship, and it's because sometimes people feel like they don't have any other choice but to go back to that relationship. You know, there might be financial concerns, there might be children involved in that relationship, or whatnot. Or sometimes people who have experienced violence, they are, you know, they might have lower self-esteem, or, I mean, people are going through a lot of things. And so, and depending on where they're at in their life at that moment, might go into another relationship in which, if they haven't completely healed from the prior experience that they've been in, or sought the counseling, or sought the help to do a lot of work and grow and kind of learn from all of that, to not be vulnerable to get into that type of situation again. You know, sometimes when I was doing direct advocacy work, where I was providing that one-on-one advocacy, some of the same clients would come in and see me, and they would have different partners and
So you
things, and
walk a fine line between respecting the decision making of the client, so to speak, and yet probably sometimes feeling so disappointed that they're back in trouble again, so to speak.
And the thing is like I said, as an advocate, and you know, I've trained lots of other advocates as well, and I know there are some advocates that I train who are newer advocates, and they do get frustrated, and they're like, oh, yesterday we talked about doing an order of protection, we filed the order and everything, and then and the order got signed, and now today they came back and they want to drop the order, and they're frustrated, and they feel like, you know, it's just going to happen again and whatnot. But I have to remind advocates that, hey, we have the easy job, right? We have the easy job in sharing what options they have. We have the easy job of talking about resources. They have the difficult job
Of
living
the-
it. Yeah, of living
the-
it. And we don't know
Right.
what else is going on in that relationship. So as frustrating as it is, hey, we come in 8 o'clock, we do the work, we go home, we're done. For them, they're in that situation.
24. Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time, so I need to have you give some resources. I think we've got 2 that we will put on the screen. First of all, your website. What is that?
So our website is our name, Standpoint, so standpointmn.org.
Okay, easy to remember. And by getting on that, I've checked it, of course, you can really plug into all kinds of arenas or areas. And then we've got a number for them that Thi said is wonderful. And it's called?
It's called Day One.
Just Day One, okay. And I've got the number, so I will share it. It's 866-223-1111. So pretty easy. And do you know if this number is available night and day?
Yes. So I actually I worked at Day One for a year, briefly, as a supervisor there. And that is a statewide hotline that victims of domestic violence and sexual violence can call for, they'll be in touch with an advocate, and they will connect them to shelter. So, and other resources and things as well around the state of Minnesota. The hotline is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't close for holidays or anything like that. So it's a good resource.
Well, thank you again. This has been a real learning experience for me, and I'm sure for you too. So best of luck as you go forward with your great organization.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being with us. I'll be back again next week.